Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best AD carries for patch 6.4. First up on my list is going to be Ashe. I think that Ashe this patch is pretty underrated. She did get a nice buff to her Q where she doesn't lose all of her Q stacks when she stops attacking. They fall off now, so if she stops attacking for 4 seconds, she's going to lose 1 stack, and then 4 seconds after that, she'll lose another, so this just makes her laning phase a lot stronger now. She is also a pretty good pick in this meta because we are seeing a lot of immobile junglers being played. Volibear and Udyr are two of the most picked junglers in the game right now, and she's really good against those immobile champions because she's got really good kiting potential with her passive, with her ultimate, and her W. She does have great pick potential with her ult too, which makes her a very strong pick for solo queue. If you can just group up in mid to late game team fights and find a pick on the enemy AD carry or mid laner with your ult, then that could just win you the game right there. She also has that vision with her E, so when I am playing Ashe, what I like to do is around the 3-minute point, I like to use my E and I can see where the enemy jungler is, so I'll throw it over to either the enemy's blue buff or red buff, and then I'll know where the jungler is, so I either know that I have to back off or I know that I can go more aggressive in the laning phase. She does have a really good level 6 all-in too, so pairing her up with a strong engage support is what I would recommend doing just to get a nice snowball going in the early game. And one con to Ashe though is that she does not have a gap closer, so you do have to focus on your positioning when you are playing as her, and what I would recommend doing is buy a QSS as your third item because that's just going to allow you to stay a lot safer in team fights. Next on my list, I have Kaitlin. Right now, I think that Kaitlin is a very underrated pick for solo queue. I haven't played against a single Kaitlin this patch. However, I've played her 6 times myself and I've won 5 out of those 6 games, so obviously she is a pretty good pick. Now, the reason why I think she's a good pick this patch is because of the changes she got to her W. The amount of damage you get off now when the enemies step on your traps is pretty crazy. You can even chunk tanks down like a considerable amount if they do step on your W, so I think that the fact that you can have 5 traps down in a team fight as Kaitlin or when you're sieging down towers, and the fact that they do a lot more damage now makes her a really good pick. I would recommend maxing out your W first actually on Kaitlin. I've been doing this recently and I've had really good success on her. You can get 5 traps down in mid-game team fights. It just allows you to zone really easily and it allows you to get a lot more damage off. You can still go for the Q max if you want, but I would personally recommend going for the W. She's a really long-ranged AD carry too, so she's got a really good laning phase and it just allows her to stay really safe in team fights. She does have one of the stronger late games for any AD carry in the game, and her gap closer just makes her a really safe AD carry as well. One con to Kate though is that she is pretty weak if she does fall behind. I find it really hard to catch up if I don't get a lead with her in the early game. Next up, I have Ezreal. Even though Ez did get nerfed this patch, I do still think he's a great pick for solo queue. Just the fact that he's got his blink with his E and he's got really good kiting potential with the Iceborne Gauntlet, it makes him a really safe pick, and as long as he doesn't die in the early game and as long as he can get to that mid-game power spike, then he can deal a ton of burst damage in team fights and he can just kite the enemies around really easily, so I do think Ez is still a great pick if you are looking to play him. He's a pretty safe laner too. He actually has a pretty strong laning phase if he can hit his Q consistently, and if he is in a harder matchup or if he does end up getting poked out a little bit, he can just sit back and farm with his Q. He is also pretty good in the assassin meta right now. Once he does pick up QSS, it's really hard for him to get engaged on because if he's got his flash up, then he's got like 2 blinks and he's also got the QSS, so it's just really hard to burst down an Ezreal in team fights. And a few cons to him though are that he is pretty skill shot reliant with his Q and his ultimate, and he is pretty weak if he does fall behind. Next on my list is going to be Sivir. So like Ashe, Sivir did get a pretty nice buff this patch. She got a buff to her W where it now can crit. So as long as you crit on your first auto attack while using your W, all of the consecutive bounces your W gives off will also crit. So this just allows her to do a lot more damage in mid to late game team fights. She's a good laning champion as well. She can easily poke the enemies down in the laning phase with her Q, and she also can poke them out with her W pretty nicely as well. Her wave clear is some of the best for any AD carry in the game. I want to call it the best for any AD carry because she does have her Q and her W, and if she builds static Shiv, then she just clears out waves super fast. She's got her spell shield, which allows her to be a really strong pick against those CC engaged champions. She's a great pick against Morgana, Leona, pretty much any support that wants to try to jump on you in the laning phase. She also does have a pretty strong ultimate. Once you get to mid to late game teamfights, you can just catch enemies out easily by popping your ultimate. You can use it to disengage as well if your team ends up getting caught, so it's just overall a very strong ability for solo queue. And a few cons to Sivir though are that she is shorter range compared to some of the other AD carries, and she is pretty vulnerable when her E and her ultimate are on cooldown since she does not have a gap closer. And to round out my top 5 for this patch, I have Kogmaw. So I was really surprised Kog did not get nerfed more this patch. He's just a really good pick right now for solo queue. I think he might be getting nerfed in 6.5. Don't quote me on that, but take advantage of him right now while you can because he's just an insanely strong mid-game focused AD carry. Once you do get your Rage Blade and Hurricane on Kogmaw, you can deal so much damage in those mid-game teamfights, and as long as you do pair him up with a good disengage support like a Janna and a Braum, then you can be really successful. And that's another reason why I think Kogmaw is great right now and why he does have a really high win rate is because Janna and Braum are meta champions right now. We're seeing a lot of good disengaged champions being played for support, so that's another reason why Kogmaw is so good this patch. He's a really long-ranged AD carry too. His W allows him to just stay pretty safe in team fights, and he also does have his ultimate, which he can use to poke from a distance. He also does do percentage health damage with his W, which makes him a great pick for shredding those tanks. And one con to Kog though is that he does not have a gap closer, so if your support locks someone like a Soraka, or if they lock someone who doesn't have good disengage, then unless you're really confident on your positioning as Kogmaw, I wouldn't pick him in that situation. However, he just does so much damage in mid-game teamfights, so as long as you know how to play him okay, then you should do really well on him. First on the honorable mentions, I have Lucian. So Lucian did get a nerf to his ultimate this patch. I do still think that he is a great pick though. I don't think that nerf really hurt him too much. I haven't been having as much success on my Lucian though lately. I've been finding better success on Kaitlin and Kogmaw, so he did slip off of my top 5, but I do still think that if you know how to play Lucian correctly, he can still be a great pick for solo queue. Next up is Calista. So Calista is not in my champion pool because she's just too hard to play for me. I find that her kiting with her passive is just, it takes so long to get used to, and I've never got it down correctly. So unless you're a really good Calista player and you know how to kite with your passive, I would stick to some of the other AD carries on my list. However, if you do know how to play her correctly, you could take advantage of her strong early game and you can kite with her passive, then she can definitely be a great pick for solo queue. Lastly, on the honorable mentions, I have Twitch. So normally I wouldn't recommend Twitch for solo queue, but due to the fact that we are seeing a lot of disengaged supports being played, he is not a bad pick at all this patch. He actually does have one of the higher win rates for any AD carry in the game right now. The amount of damage you can get off with Twitch in mid to late game teamfights is pretty crazy. His early game isn't the best though. It's definitely a lot weaker than some of the other AD carries, so as long as you can get to that mid game and get to that late game as Twitch, you can definitely be very successful on him as long as you can position correctly. And before I end the video guys, I would like to get your opinions in the comments below about how many honorable mentions you would like to be seeing in these videos. Recently, I've been getting some comments saying that 6 honorable mentions is too much, and I do agree with that because there aren't a lot of champions for AD carry and for support, so if I do 6 honorable mentions, I'm basically listing like half of the champions for that role. I do still think that doing 6 honorable mentions for top lane, for mid lane, and for jungle is good because there are a lot more champions for those roles. However, for AD carry and for support, I think I'm gonna cut it down to 3. So just let me know in the comments below your opinion on that and if you'd like to see more or less. So that is gonna be it for the video guys. If you did enjoy, then be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you have not already. Thanks for watching guys, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.